Saduddin,
Suleiman.
how was your week, bro?
My week was not very eventful. I'm working on a project. You probably remember last time I spoke to you about doing like the night school, which is like an internship I'm doing at the moment. And for it, we have to do a project. So the project I'm working on is like an audio visual project. So it involves both video and sound. And it's the question of what is it to be from the ends. So like the reason I thought about this question is because in a lot of like recent marketing stuff like that we see, like one example is the Nike what does it mean to be a Londoner advert. And recently like Foot Asylum are using people like Chunks and Philly to put out their brand into the world. And like so a lot of big companies have like have thought that, okay, cool, this idea of like what it is to be a Londoner or from the ends or from urban spaces is something that a lot of people connect to. So the question I'm looking at is like, what does it mean to be from the ends? It's a word that's used a lot. Is there like one single concept? Can it even be defined, or is it just like what people kind of feel? So yeah, I'm working on that very slowly, but that's been probably the most the thing that comes to mind. What about you?
Before I say my thing, what I find interesting about the concept of the ends, or like the way that you've described it, is that recently, I don't know what both of you think, but like there seems to be a lot like a much more established, confident London identity.
Yeah,
like,
I definitely agree.
Like prior to like the early 2000s, mid 2000s, there was like a strong Americanization of culture, right? Like especially musicians would always reference American culture and American cities and try to even adopt American accents. But like right now, London culture, and specifically London culture, but also even Birmingham culture and like Manchester culture, is just a lot more popular and a lot more like widespread.
Yeah, and it seemingly like acceptable in the mainstream, to be honest. Plus, I think Chunks and Philly are probably good faces for that, to capture that.
I remember watching like Channel 4 shows in school, and they would have, it would be like the youth show, innit? Like it's kind of like they're ticking a box. And it's the one about, and I remember they would use slang, and I'm like, no one says that. Do you know what I mean? And I think with people like them, it's like, okay, that is really London. Do you know what I mean?
Even with BBC, like BBC 3, the way it's changed in the last few years, like it's definitely, I think, a lot more appealing to like a London demographic or a younger demographic now. With that audience as well. So
yeah, I feel like the younger generation doesn't get how weird it is to have like something so authentic on the TV. Like seeing Maya Jama and Chunks present the Mobile Awards. Like it's kind of a mad thing. Like, and on Foot Asylum, like such a mainstream brand that it's crazy.
Another thing I think about London is like a lot of these people that we see on TV, we're only 3 or 4 people away from them because they still chill in London circles. Like they still are young and exist. So
it's right. And when you think about it, like specifically America, they've kind of grown up in that, like where, okay, this person, like, I don't know, Jay-Z's notoriously from Brooklyn, and like, cool, I lived in that block, and do you know what I mean? And so it always, and I think that's a new like thing that's coming to London specifically.
Yeah, it's interesting. In terms of my week, like one of the highlights, I'm not going to mention a podcast, by the way, everyone. So even though there's a couple that I would mention.
I can hear people at their homes going, why not?
Everyone's like, yes. I'm going to talk about a gym, not a gym, sorry, but like basically an online fitness thingy that I did. Like it's called Student Stretch, and Rahab, our guest, basically,
I'm like their unpaid ambassador. So
basically their brand ambassador. She kind of recommended or encouraged me to do it because she found it quite beneficial for her sessions, and it's just this online fitness class over Zoom, and like university students, like our college has it for free. And I just found it really fun.
No way.
Yeah, it was like...
Yeah, your college
cool.
Probably does too. They started off as a yoga thing, and now they're branching out into like HIIT workouts and like, different types of things.
Pass over to Rahab to give you the full application, entry requirements.
Nah, listen, it's great. Like, it was started off, I think, by one of the people who started off as a Cambridge student in our year, and it's definitely grown over lockdown. It's called Student Stretch, and a lot of colleges subsidize it. So I found it as like a great skill to pick up during lockdown. I definitely recommend anyone.
Sick.
Yeah, I've been really enjoying it.
Wicked.
So yeah,
it's proper fun for sure.
So is it like a video? You watch the person.
It's Zoom, yeah. So they send you this link, and then everyone joins the Zoom. You don't need to have your video on if you don't want to. And like, what exactly was yours? Was it HIIT or what?
Yeah, it's HIIT. So it was all live, and it's just like press ups, sit ups, squats, and like it's like circuits basically.
Yeah, 45-minute session.
Yeah.
And they send you a playlist to listen along as well. Like, it's really nice, and it's like a nice little community, I think. So.
That's so cool.
Yeah. And with the cold weather, it's just sometimes difficult to go for a run. Like it's like you can give yourself so many excuses. So it's nice to do something indoors.
Yeah, I remember doing that in the summer with Jacob, who we had on. So he was doing the same thing. And I remember, like, it just was so motivational. The fact that someone in real life is in front of you and you're doing it.
Exactly.
And they're like, come on, and you might hit them every now and then. I know, obviously, for Jacob, everyone kind of knew, or he knew everyone. So he would, like, say your name every now and then. Yeah. And it's like, oh, crap, this guy's actually watching me.
He said our names as well,
some of the, that's why I think, like, I would definitely encourage over time, like, work towards getting your camera open. I obviously can't do that, but if you can, like, I think it adds to the sense of accountability, and like, it will get you there, and he'll learn your name and stuff. So
no, bro, he said my name, but like he said it in the funniest way. He's a Spanish dude, yeah. He's so loud. It was so funny. Yeah. It was so funny.
Nah.
But he says them as, you know, the cringy personal trainers, like, let's go
you
to
can
Beast
do
Mode.
it.
I was like, say that,
do you know what? When I'm running, do you know the Nike thing?
Look to that guy as well.
Do you know there's bare runs? There's like run number 1, run number 2.
It's the same guy that does the different runs in it,
But you know, for me, I've been doing run number 2 for like 3 months. Run number 2, that's me. He's like, and every time he starts like, this is probably your second run.
Yeah.
If only you knew, mate. Yeah. Rahab, how's your week?
Oh, so mine's a lot less eventful, to be honest. Just kind of getting back into the swing of things with Cambridge. A lot of work to get caught up on, but other than that, nothing really.
For those of you that I don't know, might feel like you've heard Rahab's voice before or seen Rahab, there's a lot of history, with Rahab and this podcast. So Rahab was, I think, our first ever recorded person, right?
Those are the days. Yeah.
Bro, have we changed? Yeah,
you've upgraded since. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah. I remember, when Rahab first came on, I don't know, so do you want to say the story?
The story? Oh, what? The story of, like, I forgot to tell her that it's a visual project as
God.
well. So she just thought she was going to come and give me a mic.
People don't even know that we recorded, like, multiple times as well. So this was part 1 of 1, like...
that conversation, bro, you know what I find so funny about that conversation? Do you remember how long it was? We were so long that we had to do 3 parts on YouTube. And they were like each of them an hour long,
like 2 hours. It was like a 2-hour,
She was dropping gems. It was crazy. It was crazy.
Wow.
It was a great conversation though, like,
Yeah, so I turned up and then I sat down thinking, like a podcast, like an audio podcast. And they were like, yes, I'm seeing all these cameras everywhere. Which is great, obviously. But, here we are. Almost 2 years later now, right?
Yeah. Do you know what? When I think about that, it's like, if I was in that position, like, what do you, like, as you, like, what do you do? You can't go, like, no, you have to kind of go,
I did not come dressed for that. Like, obviously, like,
Yeah. It was like, you have to kind of just go, no, it's fine.
That's what I was doing. So you guys were nervous because your first one to ask. I'm not going to be an extra burden. But typical Saadudeen Suleiman, bro. If you know anything about them, it's that.
Yeah. Calm. So the reason we're having this particular conversation is we wanted to kind of take stock of what we've got up to so far in terms of the podcast. Obviously, talk about like why we started it and a lot of and maybe pick up on some themes that we've already spoken about. And we thought, who better than to have the first person we've ever spoken to on the podcast.
Honoured.
And a good friend as well. Yeah.
It's good. It's good to be on. I'm very excited to do this. I think the listeners also have wanted to know for a while what happens like behind the scenes in terms of this podcasting process. So hopefully I can get all of their questions out. But let's take it back then. So usually the first question you guys ask your guests is, tell me your first memory. So tell me your first podcasting memory.
Podcasting memory.
That's
such a sick question. Well done.
Touche.
Let's just end it there.
You go first.
So mine would be with Zach. Is that yours?
Bro, like, when you say podcasting memory, do you mean like even like my first exposure to listening to a podcast?
No,
like,
I mean like to do with you guys' podcast.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Then that's not a very good question.
Suleiman wants to talk about a podcast today. Is that what
I was waiting to talk about it.
We can do actually. That's interesting as well. But yeah, go on.
You do that, and then I'll do what I have actually meant.
You'll answer the question. I won't answer the question.
This is how you know he's a history student. Well, flip the question.
These are the parameters. No. Okay, one of the podcasts that come to mind straight away, it's got to be Have You Heard George's podcast?
Okay.
It has to be Have You Heard George's podcast, because I think me and Sadadine bonded over that podcast as well. Like, it was the first podcast that me and Sadadine spoke about with enthusiasm and with a sense of like awe to an extent. Like, I think up until that point, no one had really done what George had done, and it was so. I let Sadadine talk about it as well, but it was just so innovative, and it kind of showed us the potential of podcasting as well, and how it's actually it's a very technical thing. And although we don't do what George does, like there's no scripts and there's no like huge production, we still have taken a lot of inspiration away from him in terms of paying more time and more attention on sound and like visuals and like just like being ourselves as well, because he's so himself that it kind of encourages other people to be themselves as well. And seeing the success that he's been able to achieve as well is crazy. So that's how I would answer that question.
Yeah, I mean, just on that particular podcast, I agree. Like, definitely, it provoked a lot of conversations between myself and Suleiman about like, why do we think it was good? What made it so sick? I remember even you, Rahab, saying like, listen, when you listen to it, trust me, it's mad.
Yeah, that first season, I still remember now.
Yeah. And for me, the one thing I think it taught me is that just to be radical when you're being creative. I think that was the main thing.
Really,
and there's no, like, what you expose yourself to is oftentimes what you be used to. And oftentimes when you think of creating, the road you might go down to create. And it's like the more things you listen to, the more exposed you are to different ways of doing things. And I think listening to Have You Heard George's podcast was one of those key like pivotal, like turning points of like, okay, there's no framework that you have to follow. As long as it's kind of, there's an element or there's a truth to it, there's a story to it, there's an authenticity to it, then someone somewhere is going to connect to it. So for me, that's what listening to that particular podcast made me think about.
Interesting. But go on.
I was going to say, what did you think about it? Because you were actually, I think, the first person to tell me about it.
Yeah, I think Suleiman is the person who recommended it to me.
Okay.
Yeah. George's podcast is absolutely powerful, to be honest. Like, he's someone I had come across beforehand, but I think that podcast is the first time when I actually, like, a lot of it really resonated with me. I definitely agree with you guys. He takes production quality and production like potential to a new level. And that's something that's like hugely impressive. But so what elements of George's podcast do you think you bring into your day to day?
It's difficult to answer that question because it's a very different type of podcast, it's much more of like I don't want to call ourselves traditional because we're not traditional, but it's like it's not an interview, it's a conversation between friends. So it doesn't have that level of planning, because there's a lot of spontaneity, there's a lot of like being reactive to what our guest says. So it's like you can't write a script and you can't like think about every single word you're going to say, and it's a lot less thought through to the same extent that George's podcast is. So I would just say it's a different podcast entirely. But what Sadadine said in terms of not operating within a fixed framework and like not being rigid and like
in terms of creativity.
Yeah, and just challenging yourself. That's probably one of the biggest things we took away from that. Yeah.
Now in terms of the question, I actually so your earliest podcast.
Yeah. I thought one thing that comes to mind is being in Shepherd's Bush, meeting up with Zach.
Shut up,
meeting up with Zachariah, who's also, if you're on Instagram, you scroll down.
Go to the blue.
One of the OGs.
Go right down to the bottom. Yeah, you'll see man like Zachariah, who's been like he's kind of been a like shadow director. Like he's just been always kind of operating and so it was me, Zach and Suleiman. We went to Shepherd's Bush in Amigos. We're sitting on the end of the long. If anyone's ever been there, if anyone's ever been there,
for Amigos, isn't it?
Let me paint the picture. Yeah, so we go in, And then in Amigos, it's always packed. I don't know, it's always packed.
Yeah. They don't have enough
seating.
seating.
Yeah, they don't.
Yeah.
I think it's on purpose. They
It's smart, innit? Smart.
Standing room only, yeah. So obviously, there's that long table on the left, and then there's the little booths. Yeah. If you get those booths, you're lucky. Like you must have gotten there.
Never happened,
You must have reserved them. But so we were on the edge of the long table. And me, Suleiman, and Zach were sitting kind of like as a triangle there, like boom. So then we were talking about like, this was first year, first term. I think it was the winter of first term. No?
Yeah, could have been, yeah.
So we were like, like I think I don't know how you would probably have to jog my memory, but I just remember the conclusion of the talk was that like let's do this, like let's just get people that we think are really cool, and like have conversations with them, because there's so many that we know like that have gone through the uni route that have nothing to do with uni, that are just interesting people, and let's just have these interesting conversations are just about them kind of thing. And I remember the moment we were like, okay, this is a real thing, is this idea, and it's been like a yardstick we used to measure a lot of things, but this yardstick of it does more than one thing, like it's 2 birds, 1 stone, or a lot. And that was like, we get to catch up with people we want to catch up with, and 2, we get to have a chat about them, and like have an interesting chat about them with them, about themselves, and about how they're doing, and about where they want to go. And so when we realized, we can do these 2 things in one go, we were like, like why not, kind of thing. And then that's where the struggle began.
The only thing I would add is I just remember me and Sadadine making that long walk from Shepherd's Bush Green, to Hammersmith's train station, and we would just be like jump like ideas back and forth, like
I can just imagine this, screaming and shouting.
All you need to do is imagine 2 people walking down that road in their own bubble.
At least it was London. At least it was London, not Cambridge.
In London, bro, we were in our own bubble, and like I remember that one walk here when we were discussing name ideas.
Yeah, I remember.
It was so funny. Like we were just saying the weirdest.
Was this still like around Christmas time?
It was. It was
like the second time we went Bush.
Yeah.
But that walk is a legendary walk, by the way. That
walk from as well. We went to Creams. Like remember when we designed the logo in Creams. Hammersmith. Remember that?
We were on. I think it was on your laptop, innit?
Bro, we should do
wait, so name was decided by this point?
Yeah, because you know how you have to decide the name quickly, because how are you going to get something out there without a name? So that was one of the first things we decided after work.
Okay, let's talk a bit more about that name process then. So after work was how this started then.
Yeah.
What was the thinking behind that? How did you reach that?
What, the name after work?
Yeah.
Okay, from what I remember, Sadadine and like both me and him both agreed that it needs to be something that's quick to say, something that is it's just easy to say and quite memorable. So that's why we went with After Work. But since we've had a name switch now, so we're called Have You Met, right?
Yeah.
And the reason we've switched our name primarily is because we want our name, we want it to kind of, what we do to be on the tin. What's the saying? Is what it says on the tin. Yeah. It is what it says on the tin. So we feel like Have You Met is a lot more reflective of what we actually do on the podcast. We meet people and we give people a chance to meet them too, which is why it's called Have You Met. Like.
But yeah, something I've realized with you two ever since the start of this podcast is I regularly ask, like, what is this? What's the purpose of it? Where are you guys going? You just mentioned that, the reason why you changed name is because you wanted to narrow down the purpose, and Have You Met is more reflective of that. At the moment, on your iTunes, on your Spotify, it says conversation with students and young professionals on who they are and what they want to become. So without using those words then, tell me what Have You Met is.
That's a good question. Do you want to go?
No, go ahead.
Just because I think you guys have hidden behind conversations with friends quite a bit.
Okay, cool. I see why you asked that question. To get to the real essence of what we do. Yeah?
Exactly.
Okay, I don't know how to say this without using the word friends. It's kind of difficult because it's like part of their lexicon. For me, it's just like what Sadadine said earlier about why we wanted to start it in the first place. About like getting to know cool people, and like finding out more about their stories. And for me personally, I feel like it's very valuable to let other people find out about them too, because I know how cool they are and I know how impactful they've been on my life. So it just makes sense to, like, even though I don't go into this project wanting to, like, it's not, I mean, like, this isn't an access project as its kind of first primary goal. But like, I do see that benefit from the project. I do, like, a lot of people come up to me and say, I enjoyed listening about the experiences and the story of the guest that you brought on, and that does make me happy because I just know how sick they are. Do you know what I mean? And I want other people to get to know them as well because.
So shedding light on people's experiences.
Maybe that's what I'd say. Shedding light on other people's journeys and experiences, and just like giving other people a chance to get to know them as well. Do you know what I mean?
Okay.
Yeah.
So what is it that you think about then before you invite a speaker on, or like what's the connecting factor between all of your speakers, would you say?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's a straightforward answer to that. Like one of us has to know them like well. Do you know what I mean? It has to be someone that we have an existing connection with. Like none of the guests we've ever brought on are people that we've met for the first time. Like every single person we've brought on are people that we've met previously and we've kind of bonded with them and we know them well. Off the back of that, like 2 words for me that like I think are quite symbolic are just like is normalizing introspection. I think introspection is a key word that's not within our bio on our Instagram page, but it's something we do. And I think like all of our guests would agree that what we're doing is we're introspecting. We're kind of like thinking about our past memories, our past experiences, and kind of like just talking about them. Like because often the times we don't talk about them and we don't like I mean, it's not a therapy session, but it's like sometimes it feels like that sometimes. And even though that's kind of even though that's not, we don't go into this thinking that it's a therapy session, we definitely go into this wanting to introspect and wanting to kind of like find out more about other people's journeys and them to find out more about their own journeys, because a lot of the time when people come onto the podcast, they say afterwards, I never thought about that. I haven't thought about that in a while. Do you know what I mean? Like, and I think that's something that we try to encourage.
Yeah, I was listening. I mean, I've listened to the vast majority of your episodes, and that friendship question tends to always come up. Is that something intentional? Why do you think you always get that in there?
Question. I think a lot of the questions we ask are to do with like what's on our mind anyway, or like what we think the most about. So you can probably learn so much about whoever we bring on, or even ourselves. Yeah, not really from the answers we give, but from the questions we ask. Because I think that is very telling. Obviously, Suleiman and I, we've grown, like we've bonded over the journey of the podcast. Like when we first started, we knew like, alright, cool, because it's a big venture to go on like with someone. Like we're gonna do this project, even though we're at uni and we have to do our degree, but we're still gonna do this. And so that is like at the core of what we do, like Suleiman and I's relationship. And it's like, as the podcast has gone on and we've done more episodes, all of that, we've learned a lot about each other just from working together kind of thing. To the point where, I can speak to Suleiman in a week, and throughout that whole week, we don't have a conversation that isn't about a version of work, like every message. And so it's kind of like, sometimes I think to myself, bro, like I've not actually spoken to Suleiman properly. Do you know what I mean? It's literally everything's about like, bro, what time?
That's always the thing with this, because I've got a project with a friend, obviously, as well, and sometimes we've noticed that like it tends to become very interwoven, and you forget to sometimes just stop and ask about each other. Yeah. But so then I'm interested to know what's one thing you guys think you've learned about each other in this process of podcasting.
I learned so much about Saturday.
Spill the tea. It's all going to come out.
Bro, literally, like, I think we both know so much about each other. Like, in terms of the way we work, in terms of like our, like, not idiosyncrasies, but like we just know each other very well. We spend a lot of time with each other. Like, as simple as that.
So give me some insight.
Give me some juice, man.
I want to know.
What comes to mind? Okay, one thing that I will say. No.
I just want to say, right, before I go into this, right?
No offense.
No, for real. Okay, one thing I'll say, is I'm gonna say something that has changed, but it links to your question, and it's like when me and Sadadine, we don't often disagree, but when we do disagree about a particular road we should take or a particular decision we should make, we both like articulate it in a different way. Like I think at the beginning we would kind of just say it and just like we react to whatever the other person said, and just like whether we agree or disagree, we just kind of do it. But now I feel like we're a lot more thoughtful about like the way we disagree with each other. So like if I don't agree with his position about something, I will spend some time thinking about why I disagree with it and actually come with like a clear argument.
Yeah.
I will give him 3 points or 2 points that I believe are worth taking note of. And I think that's made our communication a lot more smooth and a lot more efficient, and we make decisions a lot more quicker now. I think that's worth making.
Do you know what? On this point, it's something I was actually thinking about today. The importance of giving feedback to your friends. I would say to anyone that's listening, like you should be to your friends, the biggest supporter and the harshest critic at the same time. And for example, let's say a friend of yours was going to give a speech or presentation, right? Like I would say one thing the podcast has taught me, and to pick up on what Suleiman has said, is that I would want to be that friend in the crowd, that is taking notes as my friend is talking, as if like I'm interviewing for them for a job, and like say the main things that I really liked and the things that I think you can do better. And then once you're done, I'll take you like a week later, I'll go out to dinner or whatever, and I'll be like, look, I really like this, but I think you can do this better. And I think if we can all do that for our friends, it will just mean everyone's just better. And I think it just makes like the trust where like you just make me, it just improves the trust you have with your friends and the bond you have with your friends. And I have to say on that point, I have to shout out a mutual friend of ours, MK, because I remember he did that, and it was like the Suleiman can tell you about the context, but it blew my mind. Like the way he did it, it was just mad.
Yeah, I've taken a leaf out of MK's book, man. Like I think it's something that I've tried to implement in my day-to-day as well. So whenever, not like I get asked often, but if someone like wants my opinion about something, I will try my best to kind of give them thorough advice, or even proactively, man. Because like Sadadine said, you should, as a friend, you should proactively try to give feedback, and like not like we praise our friends like very generously a lot of the time, which is obviously good. But I think feedback and criticism is also super important, man. I like you want to have a no filter relationship where you can kind of just be completely honest. The funniest thing about that episode is that
big up now.
when you listen
big
to
up now.
it's the most
one
popular video. But like,
the quality was
thing,
mad in terms of what she's saying.
The funniest thing is that when you listen to it with headphones, like when one person speaks, you hear it from one headphone, and when the other person speaks, you hear it from the other headphone.
Do you know what's funny? To give you an insight into Suleiman, you asked why he changed. He was like,
wait, what?
So obviously, when I was speaking, you could only hear me in the left ear. When Suleiman was speaking, you could only hear him in the right ear. And obviously, the thing is, we didn't really know how to fix this, innit? And I remember it was a bit difficult. So Suleiman just went, bro, it's better anyway. Like,
at least someone knows who's speaking. That's the way I justified it.
So at least they know, like when it's in the right ear, it must be Suleiman's turn. I'm like, bro, that is a fake excuse.
Really started from the ground.
I remember it was very fun. I remember I felt sorry for Zach. I remember we had a long table that took ages to move, and it basically the space was way too small for a minute, way too small. And his knees, but you couldn't see it on the video, but his knees are cramped up against
under
this
the
desk.
Table.
Under, and he's like,
we didn't even
squashed.
use this version for YouTube. Like this is the version we completely scrapped.
Really?
Like,
he was just squashed for like 2 hours in between like the desk and my drawer. So like things like that.
So why is it that you guys went for video then?
That's a good question.
Knowing those,
and I actually think this is something that me and Sadadine slightly disagreed on at the beginning of the podcast. Like for me, I've always listened to podcasts via audio.
Yeah, same.
But for Sadadine, he's much more like he's consumed podcasts more through like YouTube and like visual visual platforms. So, but ultimately, I agree with Sadadine in the sense that like I feel having it on both platforms is obviously optimal. So if we can do both, let's do both. Do you know what I mean? That was the way we justified it.
It's just been a learn by baptism kind of process, right? Like just
100%. But to be fair, I don't think there's a right answer, like whether you do this or that. But it was another one of those things that we just had to be like, why? Like we had to try to ask ourselves why,
Okay. So I have a why for you then. So we've got all this music that's coming into the recent episodes, these lovely clips of Cambridge, the cows, amongst other things. The colours as well in the last episode, I noticed as well. Yeah. What's the thinking behind that? Are you experimenting or are you? Okay.
So it's a bit of both, innit? Sometimes it's like for example, the colour, so in the last one, there's no reason for that. It was just...
it was quite cool.
The thing was... avant-garde.
I was like, okay, that's happening, fine.
Do you know, my friend was like to me, bro, like, why did you have the red thing? I was like, bro, it's too dark. That's the reason. It was too dark. So he WhatsApp me, he's like, why did you have the red? What's up with the red? I was like, yeah, bro,
I thought the camera just started bugging out or something.
And I was like, so we either had to scrap it or just do something with it. And then he responded to me with the most logical response ever. He's like, why didn't you just use one of the camera's angles then? Why did you use both, innit? I just aired him. I was like, bro, I'm not getting into this.
Why you the same you that just said I love constructive criticism from my friends?
I'm not gonna lie, with him, with Ezra, bro, like when he comes up to me, I'm like, bro, shut up. Anyone else, calm.
Another quality episode, by the way. No, that's not it.
But I would add that we did upload 2 versions with just one of the thing and one with the, but it was too late. It was too late.
Just to say.
But like, do you want to go into this, bro?
Yeah, let's do it.
The funniest thing is, I was like to start to do when we were first uploading. It's kind of dead, bro. I don't know if we should do it.
Yeah.
But then
wait, what do you mean? The colours or the count? Okay.
And then he emailed me, He emailed me at like 2 a.m. was like...
Emailed you?
Yeah, emailed, because he's a bit different sometimes, isn't it? He doesn't like to be on his phone all the time. He's like, bro, that was the worst decision we've ever made.
Well, I think one of the nice things about the podcast is it's in a place where it's serious enough where we want to do our best, but it's not so like make or break. It's not like a penalty at the World Cup final where like if you flop this, it's over.
Yeah.
Like we can just try things and then and then fix it or think about it in the future and like one of the themes, speaking of themes, like we spoke about friendship, etc. One of the themes is like self-improvement and like it's just another thing that we think about is like how do we want to look back at this in 5 years' time, or how might everything that we've learned or like picked up on it might inform our futures or like future decisions. And I think that's kind of part of it. It's not really the execution. And this is something I took from George's podcast. It's not really the execution that made it sick for me. It was the attitude towards that project. It's the attitude of doing, it's the attitude of like, I'm going to have a whole episode where one of the episodes of someone in my brain having a conversation. Do you know what I mean?
Completely.
And it's like, for me, it's not, it's the attitude to go, I'm going to do it. And it's going to be a whole production, and if you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't. But I'm going to do it. And for me, I think that like thinking in more of an attitude sense has been like a big part of the podcast.
Yeah. I'm interested as well. And I think this is a question I've asked Layman before. I know that you said that you're not too concerned about response per se, but are you worried about falling into a stage where you start pandering to likes and follows and that sort of thing? Or is it part of the idea of Have You Met that you don't care?
I wouldn't say we don't care because likes
or
and
you continue regardless.
Yeah, I think we're definitely going to continue for as long as it's fun and for as long as it makes sense to continue. Do you know what I mean? Like, obviously, I would say that the recent shift towards like a more higher production and like the name change, etc., are indicators that show that we are taking it more seriously in the sense that like it's something we want to put more time into because we're enjoying it and we want to make the most of this opportunity. And we don't want it to go past us having any regrets about like wanting to put more effort into it, which is why we've like really like tried our best to kind of continue improving. Yeah.
Interesting. Another thing as well that I was thinking about is the fact that this product is very university centered. I mean, it's out of Saadetdeen's room. A lot of the people you have on are friends from uni. You're both graduating this year. So what's next for the podcast?
Yes. It's an important question. I think to be very honest with you, we haven't like made a decision about what post-uni Have You Met is going to look like.
Okay.
You know what? I'm going to say this out loud to the camera. Me and Saadetdeen, what we did say to each other is we want to upload 50 episodes this year. So that's one thing that we're going to try to hold each other accountable.
Guys.
So and we both shook hands that this is something that we're trying to do. 50
Okay.
episodes this year.
Okay.
And
How's
like-
that going so far? How many of you?
So this will be our 7th episode. So that we're
Yeah,
making
quite
progress.
impressive, Just to go back to this idea of like holding too high a standard in terms of the guests you have on, the conversations you have, this idea of personal growth, the experiences that people are expected to have. Like, you're appealing to an average listener, but you've got exceptional people come on the podcast. Well, previously you've had a lot of exceptional people come on the podcast.
You've got exceptional people. You've got people that are just incredible and they go to down in college.
No, but you've had a lot of exceptional journeys.
That's
like
so interesting.
on the podcast.
That's so, wow.
And I'm just wondering, like, how many times do I need to listen to some insane things just to think, like, I'm not doing enough. My younger self didn't do enough. Like,
that's such a status.
And you know what I think as well, something that adds to it is like, because I know you both and I know how self-critical that both of you have a tendency to be. Like, I listen along sometimes and I'm like, you're 15-year-old you, like, just allow it. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah. Do you know what? I've never thought about that. That's such a powerful insight. I don't know. That's mad. So like, man, make that answer.
I actually don't understand your point fully. Like, so tell me, so what so where is the
connecting point?
Like, so what's wrong? What's wrong?
No, it's not necessarily
with,
something wrong. It's just an observation. In through a lot of what you say. Like, for example, earlier we had a discussion about friendship, and an ideal that you both share about a good friend is someone who's ready to offer you constructive criticism. Okay, that's one thing. And then we moved on to this discussion about personal growth, and I said that I think you guys are being too harsh on your younger selves. And you said, we're holding ourselves to standards that we carry now. We've now had a discussion about experiences as well, and I'm just thinking like,
I get what you mean. I think one way I would answer the question is that I try not to assign a judgment to my previous self. It's merely just like an analysis. It's an analysis, not a judgment. You know what I mean?
Okay. Do you not think by encouraging change is in itself attaching a moral value to what you used to do, and what you're asking yourself to do?
I think change is inevitable. So like, we're always changing, and it's like, that's never going to change. So let me reflect on how I've changed previously, because it's just, you notice trends, you notice like differences in terms of the way you maneuver and like in different circumstances. So I think that's why I find it extremely beneficial.
Well, what I take from the podcast is not just a desire to analyze change, but a desire to direct you guys' change, perhaps or provide guidance for your listeners in terms of possible directions for them to change. So in that like it's a bit more just than thinking about. It's more like thinking about how we can change and what is better versus what is worse. I don't know if that's...
Do you know what? When you asked the question initially about like this idea of setting a really high expectation, or like not just high, but unnaturally or disingenuously high, or something that you can't maintain, something along those lines, right? The reason... It reminded me of something that someone said to me that watches the podcast, so a friend of mine. And they said to me, like, the one thing I would say about when I was listening to your podcast is that, do you really, like, every week read a book, like, and have, like, a profound insight, and every week you're just walking around and you're just, wow, this is amazing. And
that's really interesting.
do you remember at the end, D made a joke, like, wow, that's super insightful, and, like, you just approach the world in this way, like, do you really? And this guy, like Ezra, he's my good friend, so he knows that if I'm chatting to him on the phone, I'm not going, bro, this is so profound, listen to this quote I heard. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, I feel like it can be interpreted as a level of performance. Like, to what extent are you really just reading autobiographies every day? Do you know what I mean? Or every week? And I think, it's I don't know. It's important to check ourselves on that. I do think. I don't know. I don't know
because I think like we had the discussion initially about what the purpose of the podcast was, and actually the word I take away from it is introspection. I think that was probably a very good description of it. So I think now that we have this discussion, it does seem like the way that you carry yourselves in podcasts and a lot of the things you say are very introspective. So it matches the purpose of the podcast. But I kind of can see Ezram's point.
Yeah. To be honest, yeah, most of the things that like the thing you said there, like wherever someone messaging me, will just kind of make me just step back and go, oh, okay, that's interesting. But I won't necessarily take a position most of the time, like agree or disagree. Sometimes, like, oh, that's interesting. Like, that's how you see when you watch a thing. That's what you look out for. Or when you watch a thing, this is what you are more concerned with. And oftentimes the things I'll hear will be contradicting. So like one person will message me and say this, and the other person will say that completely opposite thing. And so, yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I don't know. I think for one thing, I've just learned about like, I don't know, to like really be true to with yourself and honest with yourself. Like, what do you think about it? And I think sometimes that's really difficult because when we like in a relationship, sometimes you need advice from someone that's outside of the relationship to be like, bro, what are you doing? You're moving, whatever. Do you know what I mean? Or sis, you're moving, but because you're in it and you spend so much time on it, and so it's difficult to have a clear point of view, or not even clear, just like how you would see it if you weren't as deep in it,
involved.
And so it's like, I think sometimes with the podcast, it's trying to do that, which is why sometimes I just won't go on. Like, I won't watch an episode, and I might be like, I'll watch it in like 3 months, because only in that way can I get some like. I can see it with my real eyes. Because everything else
refreshed
is like,
eyes. Yeah. So, I think another thing also worth commenting on is the fact that like obviously the guests that you have on your podcast change each time, and you might feel that every episode has to be like it comes across as every episode is a self-contained unit. Each episode can carry itself, but you two are something that remain constant with each, and your listeners have grown with you. So they make a judgment as to who you guys are, not based on one single episode, which is what they do for all of your guests, but based on the sum total of how you've presented yourself in all of these episodes. So what is the overall impression that you're giving off when every time Suleiman asks you, how's your week been? Or you've asked him, how's your week been? You have a new course, a new book, a new language, a new...
Yeah. It's funny. Do you know what? On that point, it's like, for us, this is just a moment in our week. Like, literally,
exactly.
we do it,
and it's a new
cut.
conversation as well, and each conversation needs to be full, right? But lots of full conversations, and you two are the one thing constant within all of those conversations.
It's interesting.
I think it's something me and Saladin speak about as well, and like I think we've tried to be more ourselves. I do think we've had conversations in the past, like before we start a podcast, like I don't know, I think maybe I think people don't realize, how significant the "How was your week?" question is. Like, it seems like such a blasé question that we just throw out there, and we just first thing that comes in our mind we'll just say. But like, it's probably the most difficult question in the entire thing, bro.
I kind of was thinking about this one on the way up
because it's consistent. Because we know we're gonna answer it, and because we like asking.
And there needs to be a different answer to last time, and
like whether it needs to be different, it's just like it'll be nice for it to be different. Okay. You know what I mean? Like it's. Like, even ourselves, like, we don't want to be saying the same thing every week, do we? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, like I listened to a podcast this week.
Like,
for example.
I was just listening to this podcast then.
Yeah, but I see where you're coming from, for real. But I think...
I don't actually know if I'm expressing an opinion. Yeah. More so just a bunch of observations. Like...
Yeah.
So, for any future podcasters out there then... what would you guys say, looking back, is the one piece of advice you'd offer, or something along those lines, essentially, for anyone interested in this journey? Yeah. What's a reflection you have?
Should I go? So I would say try to, what's the word? Two birds with one stone. I think Saladin mentioned that at the beginning. I would maybe write down some of your interests on a piece of paper, whether it be whatever your interests are, and try to just do a bit of a Venn diagram and try to do something that hits as many things as possible. So if you do that, and if you do something that you're genuinely interested in, it brings that fun element, and it reduces the kind of the chore element, like the chore factor, because to some degree this is a chore. Like, there are certain times when it's like, I would rather be doing something else than subtitling a video. But because I believe and I enjoy the process as a whole, I do it. So, I mean, in a sentence, just make sure you're having fun and do something fun, and try to kill two birds with one stone. Yeah.
I would say just get started. That would be my advice.
Okay.
have, like, more practically speaking, think of the next 3, if we're just going with the podcast in particular, think of the next 3 episodes that you want to create, and just start with the first one, and then do the second one, and do the third one, and don't worry about it being good.
And if you're lucky enough to have someone that you're close with, or a friend that is on the same wavelength, and that, like, you both, I think it's so ideal. Like, I'm very blessed to have Sadudin at this university. Do you know what I mean? Like, I wouldn't have done this by myself. No, 100%. And, like, having someone to do it with you, it just makes it a lot more enjoyable and a lot more, like, worthwhile. So if you have a friend if you have a friend that's interested in doing a similar thing, just link up and do it together.
So it all comes down to friendship again, right?
Full circle.
Full circle.
Yeah. So when's your podcast starting?
Okay, well, I've been taking notes this entire time.
Yeah.
Now I'll leave that space to you guys. You're not ready for that.
Listen, next year I'll have a drop on the podcast. 100%. I'm saying it right now. Put it into the universe.
So on the topic of coming full circle, Rahab, thank you for agreeing and coming down to do this. Your actual conversation that we're going to have is forthcoming, innit? So just to answer the questions that's on the tip of a lot of people's tongues, soon come.
Coming very soon then.
You got to pay my... No, I'm joking.
Yeah,
thank you for having me.
Now, this is an interesting convo, man.
Yeah.
It made us think about things I haven't thought about in a long time.
Good.
And maybe, this could be a tradition every year.
Yeah, I think we should anniversary chat.
Why not?
I feel like people should put questions in, like, the comments or whatever it is that you guys have that they've specifically wanted to. I did want to kind of, like, post a thing on my story, but I didn't want to tell people that was. Yeah, but it would have been nice to kind of get some participation going.
Who knows? I'm just going to say it. In
Maybe
a non-COVID world,
Yeah.
we will come together
Exactly.
in a Francopan hall.